Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really cool puzzle. How can we teach a machine, something that thinks in just ones and zeros, to understand one of the most human, most creative parts of our language? Metaphor?
When you or I hear a sentence like this, we get it, you know? We instantly know it's not about an actual virus. But for a computer that takes everything literally, how on earth can it grasp that kind of abstract meaning? And that, right there, is the huge challenge we're looking at today. How do you teach a completely literal-minded machine to navigate our very figurative world? How do you program something to see the poetry in our everyday language?
All right, let's get into it. Here's the game plan for how we're going to break this all down, from the basic logic of what a metaphor even is, to why this tech is actually a pretty big deal. Okay, first up, to teach a computer anything, you have to be super specific. And it turns out, metaphors have two different layers we need to pull apart. There are the exact words we say, and then there's the big idea humming along underneath. So on one hand, you've got the linguistic metaphor. That's the phrase itself, like saying cure poverty. But on the other hand, there's the conceptual metaphor. That's the deep connection our brain is making, the whole framework of poverty is a disease. And here's the key. For a computer to really get it, it can't just memorize phrases. It has to learn the concept itself. And realizing that, well, it changes everything. Suddenly, the goal isn't this impossible task of teaching a machine every metaphor ever. The goal is to teach it the conceptual building blocks that we humans use to come up with metaphors in the first place. To pull this off, researchers start with something they call a source domain. Just think of it as the well we draw our metaphorical language from. It's almost always something really concrete and physical that we all understand, like, a disease. And then you've got the target domain. This is the abstract idea we're trying to explain by borrowing all that language. So in our example, that's poverty. We're essentially mapping the language of disease onto the idea of poverty. So the whole approach is this really clever two-step process. First, as you can see, you have step one, seeding the domain. This is where researchers plant a few core ideas to get things started. Then comes step two, expanding the space, where the system takes those seeds and grows a much, much richer map of all the language tied to that concept. So let's talk about phase one, planting the seeds. To define a concept like disease for a computer, you can't be vague. You have to start with the most obvious, the most undeniable examples you can find. So how does the seeding thing actually work? Well, researchers literally handpick a few perfect, prototypical examples for each source domain. You can see here, for the idea of disease, they might feed the system the words disease, cancer, and plague. For body of water, they'd use ocean, lake, and river. These words act like anchors, right? They define the absolute core of the concept for the machine. Okay, now for phase two, which is where it gets really interesting. With those seeds planted, the system is ready to learn on its own. It basically scours these massive databases of text, we're talking billions of words, to find the unique conceptual fingerprint for that domain. It's looking for all the other words and phrases that tend to hang out with those seed words we gave it. The first part of finding that fingerprint is calculating something called relation frequency, or RF. It sounds technical, but it's pretty simple. The system just counts how often a related phrase, like diagnose with, shows up near our seed words, like cancer or plague. If it pops up a lot, that's a huge clue that diagnose with is probably part of the whole disease concept. But just being frequent isn't enough, right? Think about a word like has. It shows up everywhere. It's frequent, but it's not special. So the system also calculates what's called inverse domain frequency, or IDF. This is a super clever score that measures how unique a phrase is to this one concept. So a phrase like dive into shows up a ton with our body of water seeds, but almost never with our disease seeds. That gives it a high IDF score, marking it as a key part of that concept's fingerprint. And this is where it all comes together. You just multiply the frequency score, the RF, by the uniqueness score, the IDF, and that simple formula gives you this incredibly powerful final ranking. It finds the words that are both common and unique to a concept. That's how it builds that conceptual fingerprint. And here you go. This is the result of all that work. Just look at this table. For the disease domain, you see phrases like diagnosed with and afflict shooting right to the top with really high scores. And for body of water, dive into and wade through are way up there. This is the goal right here, a ranked list of language that acts as the unique fingerprint for each idea. Okay,
So the system has built these incredibly detailed maps of different concepts and their unique vocabularies. Now what? How does that actually help it understand a brand new metaphor that it just finds out in the wild?
Let's use this real-world example. Say the computer reads this sentence, threatening to plunge more children into poverty. Now, we know poverty isn't a swimming pool, but how does the machine figure that out?
And boom, this is the payoff. The system grabs that key phrase, plunge into, and it checks it against all those conceptual fingerprints it built. And just as you can see here, it finds that plunge into has a super high RF IDF score, a really strong signal, specifically within the body of water domain. And just like that, it makes the connection. It correctly tags this sentence as an example of the conceptual metaphor, poverty is a body of water. It learned to see the hidden logic. How cool is that?
So, this whole automated process for finding and classifying metaphors, it's not just a clever trick. It actually has some seriously profound implications for how we understand human culture and even how we think.
Now, you might be wondering, okay, but how do we know the computer's actually right? And that is an absolutely critical question. To make sure all this is accurate, the system's findings are always double-checked and validated by human experts. This step is crucial because it blends the massive scale of AI with the subtle understanding of human linguists. It makes sure the results aren't just interesting, but that they're scientifically solid. And this all matters because, really for the first time, we can analyze language on a massive, massive scale. We can start to automatically see how entire cultures talk about and frame big ideas like democracy or governance or inequality. This tech uncovers the hidden patterns, those invisible structures that secretly shape how we all think and talk. So in the end, by teaching machines to understand the poetry in our language, we're not just building smarter apps, we're actually building a new kind of mirror, one that can show us the hidden ways we structure our own thoughts about the world. And that leaves us with a pretty fascinating question to think about. What other hidden patterns about ourselves are we going to discover next?